Hey, so today I'm going to talk about the Kellogg Brothers, a little bit about CW Post. Dr. Kellogg was kind of a progressive doctor with some really great ideas and some really wacko ideas. He believed in electroshock therapy, which was a thing. He also believed in yogurt enemas. I didn't know that was a thing. And he ran Battle Creek's sanitarium, sorry. But he also was very progressive in that he believed in a vegetarian diet, and he also believed in exercise. So like, kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of exercise. And he even had, I guess, a record because they used phonographs back then, um, with him sort of dictating for the audience at home to do like squats and I guess jumping jacks and whatever else. But I thought that was kind of cool that he early recognized the importance of diet and exercise. So he was progressive in that sense. He was also kind of a, a eugenicist, so that's a different story. And he also never consummated his marriage with his wife for like 40 years because he believed it like tapped into his vitality and was like not healthy to have sex or masturbate. So that's an interesting fact I learned about him. And he had fostered a bunch of children. He lived, I think, until 91 or 89, which is maybe, I mean, extreme measures. Could be coincidence and good genes, but yeah, he lived a long time. And the other character is Will, his younger brother, who's sort of nobody expected much of him. His parents were kind of jerks too. They thought he was like stupid, so they didn't invest in his education. So Kellogg thinks he's the big man by having Will work for him in the kitchen. And Will is like basically the operations guy. Like he keeps Battle Creek Sanitarium. I don't know why I'm keeping doing that, but running like a well-oiled machine. And he oversees the kitchen staff making this product. It's granola, but it's not like the granola we eat today with all like the nice like coconut sugar and like nuts and stuff in it. It's like, almost like a graham cracker, like kind of plainness. But the reason they served the cereal was because there were a ton of GI issues like stomach cancer, ulcers, because food was so adulterated. There was no FDA. And then before the FDA, there was like a proto FDA that didn't even exist. And that was actually pioneered by Heinz because Heinz, that's a different story, but Heinz basically like was one of the reasons like food control started happening in, this country in the US. So back to Kellogg, they made this cereal for people who are having digestive issues. And uh, it's what they served. And Will had the brilliant idea of serving it with milk. So cereal, right? And it's basically like they would bake cornmeal and some other flours and mallet it up and then serve it with milk. And that's what the patients ate. And Will Kellogg, the younger brother, is like, hey, like this is really good. A lot of people seem to like it, even though it's a health food. Um, we should think about manufacturing this. This is good money. It can help the sanitarium. And Kellogg is like, no. Part of the reason is because if you were a doctor and hawking a product, you looked a little bit like a snake oil salesman. So he's against it. But Will is like, look, there's a lot of sick people that are dying because food is so adulterated. And like, it's crazy. They used to put blooming powder, which is legit laundry detergent, in food, like in milk, especially. And people would die from, there was a case in the UK, Wales, 65,000 people died, TB, from basically moldy and poisonous dairy. So yeah, that was a real thing. So I think obviously Will was motivated by some dollar signs, but he was also really aware, seeing at the all of the people that came in with like really horrific GI, life threatening, and then some, really stage 4 type of stuff. So whatever. And then they get this patient, a CW Post, obviously Post cereals, right? He is broke. He's had a lot of nervous conditions and stomach issues. And I think he's just like one of those like high strung anxiety people. Like, and they didn't have labels and psychologists back then, and even like labels aren't to be trusted fully, but they don't really know what he had, right? Back then, maybe it could have been depression or whatever. So he comes, he's broke, he's working in the kitchen, and he's really fascinated by this granola. And he learns, like, he starts like reading Will's notes and like really figuring out how to do this. And he's like, oh, this is gonna be my money making product. So he actually steals their recipe, adds a little sugar, makes it more sexy, and starts mass producing it. And calls it grape nuts. I'm sure you've had this. It's like that like dense cereal. I know my grandma used to have it in the house a lot, and it just was a weird texture, but it's like you either like it or hate it. So Will is like, what the F? This guy stole our recipe, and he's pissed. So one night he leaves out their mixture, and he's like, oh crap, I left out the mixture. And instead of tossing it, he runs it through the rollers, and it creates like this flake. And he's like, let's like experiment with this. Turns out like the people really like it, the patients really like it. And he's like, I'm onto something here. So he talks to his brother again, and he's like, hey, dude, let's do this. Look at this post bastard. Basically, he's making profits. And Kellogg is like, well, you can't run a business. Like, you're an idiot, And Will's like, I've been running this place forever. So, yeah, that happens. And really, like, nothing changes. And then one night, a fire happens, and the place is like toast. And that's when Will is like, all right, I'm going to get a loan. He gets like the modern equivalent of $1 million from one bank, which like has faith in him. And he's like, hey, I'm going to give you a check, bro, if you give me your recipe. And Kellogg was really committed to his institution. So he's like, okay, fine. And the brothers really don't talk. They kind of had some really big beef. And I think mostly because of Dr. Kellogg, not so much Will. Will was like, let's do this together. So Will goes off on his merry way and starts making cornflakes. He like modifies the recipe from that first batch, adds a little malt to make it more palatable to consumers, and starts making it. And he's like, you know what? F this post SOB. I'm like, it's on, right? So that's basically what happens. And he's having trouble mass producing his product, right? Like imagine people like rolling this and like old school, like your grandma, like doing that. Like that's not, if you're trying to build like a national brand, it's not happening. So he's really smart. He realizes like tobacco uses these giant rollers, and he's like, I bet they could make me some. So I don't know if he modifies the original design or like basically buys tobacco rollers, but he installs those in his plant and is like cranking out, Kellogg's cereal and, kind of beating post at this point. And then I forget exactly what happens, but there's a fire again. That seems to be a very common thing that happened back then. Probably all the kerosene lamps. I don't think his factory was electrified, but whatever. Thankfully, they get out. The rollers are destroyed. So Post is a real sneaky son of a gun and gets rights to those rollers. But I forget the wording of, the legalities, but Will is so smart. He calls the roller manufacturer and he's like, hey, I'm not a new client. I'm an old client, and I'm asking you to repair my rollers. So they're like, okay. But the rollers are so bad that they replace it. And they do this like secretly. They send him rollers via train. I don't know what they do, but like, sort of in the middle of the night, send Will his new product. And then Post finds out, he's really annoyed, but there's not much he can do or does. So the cereal wars are like raging on. And this kind of continues for a while. And what happens is, as Kellogg sort of rises to more prominence, CW posts, I don't know if it's his nervous condition, stomach ulcer. He's convinced he has stomach cancer and is like really like unraveling, has to not run the day-to-day of Post. And he actually ends up killing himself and is really sad. And his daughter, Marjorie, she kind of takes the helm of Post. But because she was a woman, and this is like those times, she has to do all of the meetings, the board meetings at her house because it's like improper or whatever for a woman to be in charge. But I still think it's pretty badass that she was pulling, sort of the strings behind the scenes. And she was really progressive and had a really keen eye for what's next. She was in Gloucester, Massachusetts, on a tip from a friend and went to go see Bird's Eye, the product we all know, like frozen veggies. So she's like, oh, this is like the next thing. Like nobody's doing this. I want to buy you out. Like, and so she buys Bird's Eye, I think for like 22 million. And he like keeps running ops and whatever and doing product. But like she made some really smart acquisitions. I think Hellman's mayonnaise too. So yeah, she was a smart lady. I'm actually reading a bio about her. And so with the brothers, they kind of have beef for the rest of their lives. When John is dying, Dr. Kellogg, he writes like a 7-page note, like an apology letter, like, sorry, I was a jerk, basically. But the letter doesn't get delivered to Will, so he actually misses his sort of like, deathbed parting. But I guess at some point he sees the letter and maybe, thinks of his brother more fondly. But I really like the story of the Kellogg brothers because, Will was one of those people that people, nobody expected much of him. And because he had an impairment that people didn't understand. They just assumed he was stupid. It's like, no, I just can't see the board, so I suck at school. Um, and yeah, I really like that he kind of paved his own future and didn't like give up. And I mean, who hasn't had cornflakes once in their life at least? So he really made like an enduring brand. And yeah, Post too. I mean, it's kind of weird how like two of the biggest cereal companies started at the same place, um, and kind of started for one of them for a little bit of a shady reason. But yeah, that's kind of the story. And I haven't been writing because my little one is sick and I've been getting like 2 hours of sleep a night. So I hope you enjoyed my rambling. And yeah, and hopefully there will be some more uh, stories about early founders that aren't like this. So, yeah, that's it. Enjoy and have a wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.